Cool. Yeah, so welcome everyone to the Gateway API meeting on July 7th. Just as a reminder, this meeting is governed by CNCF Code of Conduct, which essentially mostly boils down to being nice to each other. With that, I want to, if there's any new person that is joining and wants to introduce themselves, this is the time. Before we move on, usually we're doing this in the start of the meetings. Going once, going twice. Cool. So it looks like we have a pretty, let me share the screen, pretty light agenda. Yeah. Is Shane here, by the way?
No, I can fill in for Shane. He's yeah, it's late on East Coast. Thanks for everyone from joining for joining from there that is still around. So let's see. 1.4 release is coming very rapidly. We had this whole idea of let's try and do releases ideally 3 times a year, and wow, is it a tight schedule. So if you look at he added this to the milestone. If you expand the description of the milestone, not there,
This
or
one?
click the milestone link, and then expand the table. So we are real close to July 22. That's like 2 weeks away, which is wild to me. But yeah, we are going to try to get everything going. So okay, this table feels a little incomplete, but I think there's more on the actual discussion thing. Anyway, but the key takeaway, July 22nd, it's pinned at the very top. So yeah, we need GEPs to be final. Well, at least have final API details merged and in an implementable state in 2 weeks. That's coming up real soon. There's a lot of PRs open. Thanks to everyone who's driving them. This particular release cycle features no shortage of complex GEPs to review. We could probably spend some time on discussing all of these later in the meeting, but I don't want to waste too much time to start. So let's start. Let's just mention those, and then we can jump through the rest. And if there's time, come back to this.
Cool. Yeah, and thanks. So I see another item for the reminder. Yeah, July 22nd. That's the end of GEP API reviews. So yeah, if I encourage people from different implementations as well to kind of enhance the reviews feedback, because we need this GEP to be merged by then. So we also need to give time to the GEP authors to implement some of the feedback. Rob, I think next one is yours as well.
Yeah, I think this one is coming to a head. I think we've reached some kind of resolution on this. So Shane raised this that we have this weird type to represent true for CORS allow credentials header. It is not. It is a Boolean, but the only allowed value of the Boolean is true, which is fun. It is technically correct in the sense that you can't set the header to false. You can only set it to true or omit it. And so that just leads to wild confusion and pain. Damien left a comment at the bottom of the PR, which I think summarizes what others on the PR around the issue have suggested. And just, even though false is not going to be set on the actual header, it's probably less confusing to be able to set it than not. And then false will just mean omitted, so true is the value that will be set, and false means just don't set anything here, which is a little funny, but probably easier to work with than any of the alternatives. Unfortunately, this means it's going to be a breaking change in experimental channel if this moves forward. And Shane, you can see linked below, has a PR that would fix this, or fix is a strong term, but will make a breaking change that would resolve this issue at the expense of being a breaking change. So yeah, heads up, that's coming. I think that is probably, unfortunately, just necessary, but it makes me sad. So yeah. If anyone has strong opinions, feel free. But I think that's the least bad thing we can do right now.
Yeah. And I think the next one is also Shane about like graduating reference grant for V1.
I'd say we should leave that one till Shane's on a call, because he had the idea. I don't know. I mean, it's in a really weird state where when we took it to API review, there was like, oh, we should make this more generic. We should, and I tried for a few months at least and got some people together, but it turned into just an enormous project and just kind of fizzled out under its own weight. And so
I think that actually, it did brought up something in SIGAUTH. They released something. Here. So
so it wasn't completely useless. There were some changes that came out of SIGAUTH that helped, and were directionally towards a place where we could upstream something like resembling reference grant in the future. But it's still a huge amount of work to actually get something like reference grant upstream, as far as I know.
Yeah, I think we need to, let me write an action item to look back on. Look back on what SIGAUTH. I remember Jordan pinged me about trying something. Look at what SIGAUTH. Okay. Yeah, let's keep it for when Shane's here. Yeah, I just want to cross-reference some nice news about the Gateway Inference Extension support with Istio is kind of getting its way towards master. I think the PR is approved at this point by all people, just like maybe one or two comments to address. And yeah, this is great. And yeah, I think we're already passing conformance, and it's like I also got pinged from people from Envoy Gateway to implement similar stuff. So this is just as mostly as FYI.
Yeah, it's awesome. This is very cool to see this happen. I think we have, so GK also just recently passed conformance tests. I think there's 4 others in progress right now as my count. So list is growing, and excited to see more implementations getting across the line. And then once we get a third conformant implementation, we'll see what the third one is. There's a few in progress. I think we'll be moving forward with a GA API pretty soon.
Yep, this is great. Aryan.
Yep. Can you share the screen for this issue? So since we are extending like a lot of the APIs for mesh, and some of these APIs would require the pod labels, and I know we have ideas of defining pod labels inside the target refs. This is the other proposal that I've added, like adding the pod label selector as a top level field at the same level as target ref, and users can pick either like the labels or the targets. If they're choosing to do for the gateways, they can add targets in the gateways, and they are doing something for the mesh, they can use the pod labels directly. So it like seems a bit cleaner than that option, in my opinion. Like I just like added this so that like you guys can review it. So I tagged all of you there. Like feel free to review it and just give me some feedback on this.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks for raising this. Sadly, a lot of the people that feel strongly about policy attachment are not at today's meeting. But if if anyone does have strong opinions here, I would certainly appreciate them, especially if you're involved in a mesh. Just to make sure I'm understanding this correctly, this is instead of a target refs list or in addition to? Okay,
So
instead
yeah,
of.
it's a replacement of that. Yeah, users can either use the target refs or the label selectors if they are defining any, like if the API is for gateways and they want to use target refs, they can use it. They can't use like label selector in that case. And if they want to define API, let's say ODSI policy for some workload via pod labels, they can use label selectors like this, and they don't need to add the target refs. And we can add all the tooling with the gateway kernel around this.
Does this mean that every policy would either be for workloads or for, like, there's basically two categories? There's one kind of policy that has a pod label selector target, and there's another kind of policy, which is the policy we have today, which targets a specific object or set of objects?
Kind of. When there, so you mean like when there's overlap, users may need to create two different resources, because if we go with like adding the pod labels inside the target refs, because all these policies will have like one more semantics, like the namespace wide or the mesh wide semantics as well. So that could be pretty complex, right? Like users may have a requirement where they would want like policies for the namespace, but only for the mesh workloads in the namespace, not the gateways. So if we do all those things with the target refs, it could be a bit tricky.
Okay. Is there ever a case where we'd want to have a policy that could apply to both? I don't know. I'm just.
Yeah, I don't think so. Generally, like users would add policies based on identities, and the identities for the mesh workloads, like what the policies they want, could be different from the gateway. So I don't think there would be overlap. If there is overlap, they can always like create multiple policies. But
yeah, I would think that typically the better pattern is to have those as separate rules. If you start globbing multiple selectors into a single rule, it gets kind of out of hand easily.
yeah, so are you suggesting to create like separate policies, like for gateways and workloads?
I was specifically talking about like the multiple label selector.
Yeah, like if you had like a list of target refs, and each target ref or something could include its own distinct selector, that would get really complicated. Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Yeah. So and like a array as like a list of rules or something like that, like might be a more manageable way of having multiple things in a single resource rather than having a like proliferation of like many different policies.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this deserves a bit. Sorry, go ahead, Nora.
Leo, I was actually just going to ask you. So either way, I guess your next this Aryan, it looks like you listed authorization policy or something like that as something that could benefit. Naively, that feels like something that could be attached to like a gateway or to a set of workloads at some point,
Yes.
right? Like it's roughly the same policy you could theoretically want to attach to a set of workloads or to a gateway or maybe to both. I don't know.
Generally, like the policies for the mesh workload versus the policies for the gateways, the rules, they would be different. So users would be end up creating different policies for the gateways and for the workloads.
Why?
Because generally people create policies like for identities, they put like identities in the rules, right? And
One
they
second,
cannot
like
specify
identities.
for the gateways for the north south.
Sorry, like identities are probably the source, right? Like in both policies, identity is going to be. I mean, let's focus on east west, right? Like, I mean, identities is like a workload or something, right?
Yeah,
And
so for
then
east west, there's no point of applying the policies on gateway, right? So the gateways, the policies for the gateways, it is for the north south traffic.
do you
Not for the
consider a waypoint as a gateway?
Okay, you mean to say if a traffic is going via waypoint in ambient mesh kind of scenarios? Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. I think I didn't consider waypoint here.
Mike,
but
do you have your end up from before or?
Oh, no. This is specifically to the like, should
Oh.
waypoints be considered gateways question? And my preference, like this is a lot to dig into for a implementation specific detail. My preference is to avoid caring about the existence of a waypoint. This is not how Istio's authorization policies work today, but I would prefer if that could actually become an implementation detail. And we can just have a like single consistent way to write logical authorization policies of like, these workloads are allowed to talk to the service, and then hopefully we can figure out how to make that work within Istio.
But what's your thought about whether a policy can or what are the use cases for a policy if they are for a policy to be relevant for both north south and east west, like for the same policy? That's basically what Aaron's trying to understand.
Yeah, so one more thing to add on, as you just talked about waypoint. So I think it's still a east-west traffic, right? So waypoint can also be picked by the pod selectors, like, or anything that is inside the east-west, right?
Yeah, but I think this word starts to get confusing, right? Like we need to be clear about the semantics of the attachments because there's some implementations that have gateways as a workloads in the cluster, some that are don't. Let's say you do pod selector and you say, hey, all this traffic from this identities is allowed to talk to these pod selectors. And there's, as Mike pointed out, there's some implementation details that are like in the middle or something like this. Then like, you need to, as you pointed out in the beginning, you need to exclude gateways that are pods from actually being targeted. Yeah, I'm trying to.
I mean, even with this, if the gateway is there in the cluster, it's in cluster gateway, and if it has like running as a pod, if it has the same label, this policy should be applicable for that as well. So I guess like we cannot escape that. If somebody is defining a policy for pod labels, like it puts some selectors and the gateway selects that, then gateway would be having all those rules. So my point is, like, if something like is running for the east-west traffic, then the requirement will be similar. For the north-south traffic, it could be different.
So this gets to one of the issues that is, I think, linked in Flynn's gap. It's an issue that we have had open for about 2 years at least, regarding the like integration point between Gamma meshes and north-south gateway API implementations. And I guess like the question here is like, if you have a gateway API implementation that is not integrated with your mesh, then like the auth policies are irrelevant because the gateway is sending directly to those pods, and the auth policy is only applicable to the mesh traffic. Where it starts to get interesting is when you have an integrated gateway. So like this was the case with console. This is also going to be the case, it seems, with the direction of the work that Flynn's working on for how to integrate cluster external gateways into a mesh, like and have them represented as a workload in the mesh with an identity and stuff like that. So in that case, we do need to figure out both like how routing rules applies. I think that the like initial draft of this says that like that will probably send directly to those backend pods still and not like pass through like service like gamma routing rules. But one of the other things that we would need to define and figure out is like if and how auth policies are applied. So like, does the service owner need to allow an integrated gateway to be able to reach their service?
You mean like bypassing the OTZ rules? Like
yeah, I guess like that's an open question, is whether they would be bypassed as they are with a non-integrated external gateway, or whether by virtue of integrating that gateway into the mesh, we would need to figure out what that interaction looks like. I think that there's basically just that there needs to be some more exploration, and particularly in conjunction with the work that Flynn's taking on right now.
I see.
Well, I don't have an answer, but it's an open question.
Okay, yeah, I think I was gonna go down a very similar line of reasoning there too. Like I'm really nervous about an approach that requires gateways to be aware of all these, like for example, in the case of auth, to be aware of how to implement a pod label selector and what that means. But that I think that my train of thought may have been going a bit orthogonal, so I will leave it there. And yeah, I think what I'm hearing from this conversation is that a lot of us are scared of the idea of having multiple label selectors as a possibility in any policy, and that there's also likely going to be a common case where there are either going to be object references in target as a policy target, or label selectors. The intersection of those is something that we need to do a bit more digging into, and likely the first place to start is authorization policy, because that feels like one that would have some overlap. I don't know. Is that a fair summary?
Can you just repeat multiple label selectors and what? You said a lot of us are scaled by multiple label selectors in a target ref for the same resource.
So in the example of you have a list of target refs, we already have that. And those target refs, one of the things that a target ref supports is a label selector. So you could theoretically have like 10 different label selectors, or whatever the number of, on the same target. That seems like it could get pretty complicated to support. I don't know, Mike, was that capturing your feedback correctly there?
I think so. I'm trying to just clarify in chat that like,
okay,
I need to take more time to read through the initial proposal that Leor and Ariane have put together. I probably would be okay with a singular policy that contains multiple rules. So that way you can at least like avoid having literally 1,000 different policy resources in your cluster. But we definitely would want to cap those the same way that we do on like HTTP routes, so they don't like get a single thing that has literally everything in your cluster defined. But like if you're a application owner writing a few of those per namespace instead of dozens is probably a reasonable thing for UX. But yeah, just avoiding kind of like a singular load bearing rule that if you screw it up, all of your traffic breaks all at once is probably preferable.
Yeah, but like the point on label selectors, like did you both mean that, like, for example, the current proposal proposes target ref as a label select, like has an option to label selector in the target ref, and obviously a target refs are a list. So did you both mean that like this we should disallow multiple label selectors in the target refs? I mean, obviously it's possible with cell or with
Um,
I think that's what Rob meant, but I'm not sure
yeah,
if there's
I guess I'm thinking of label selector and target ref as two separate things. And so like label selector and specifically some way to target pods, like a client workload is important for the like origin and or client of for Aussie policy. I think it's to be determined whether that's necessary for the destination or whether target ref is in its existing state is sufficient for destination. Like if you could target a service, like is that a logical thing that is possible for meshes to implement and makes sense? Because that would be a grouping that kind of feels logical. There are some like edge cases and gotchas there, particularly around like the kind of gateway API standard for deploying a new version through like a blue-green deployment is you create a differently named service and shift traffic over with the HTTP route. And how does that interact with policies? And do you need to like modify your Aussie policy for that to work? I think that there's a lot that needs to be explored in terms of the edge cases there and like what the US looks like in kind of those less obvious situations.
So I have a question on like adding the label selectors inside the target refs. So what are the benefits do you think we'll get putting like adding the label selectors inside the target refs as compared to putting it like outside?
I think that, well, I should let Lior answer. Oh, yeah.
You can go ahead.
I mean, my takeaway is policy attachment. So to be clear, I've been very, very hesitant about the idea of label selectors in policy forever. I've probably been one of the biggest blockers of that. To be clear, I don't. I'm very nervous about the explosion of complexity that label selectors will add. With that said, one of the things that we have in policy attachment, the model, is this idea that if you structure an API in a very specific way, and it includes fields that look a very that follow the same structure, have consistency, then any generic tooling can implement that and understand how it connects to the world without actually understanding what the policy does. It just can connect it in a diagram and show this applies here, and it attaches this config to that, right? You could absolutely have a top level field to do that, right? Like a pod label selector. The problem is that, I mean, there's a couple problems. One of them is that we can't actually guarantee. The only thing that we've actually reserved in policy attachment is the target refs field. Basically, anything else is fair game for any policy anywhere to have used. It's hard for me to imagine that somebody would have used pod label selector in a way that was, compatible with policy attachment, but maybe they could have. Like, we didn't say you can't. So that's one thing. If you stay within target refs, that's kind of within a world that we know and theoretically own. It also makes it more clear that this is, that there's very little that indicates that something like is, a gateway API policy. But one of the things that has become basically universal across policies is there's a target refs field, right? And so that's a thing, right? With that said, we don't have to do any of those things. That's just a bit of a bias that makes it a bit easier to squeeze into something that already exists. For the sake of authorization policy specifically, you could argue that this is not exactly the same kind of policy as everything else we've called policy in Gateway API, and this is more of a network policy kind of policy than a Gateway API policy, and maybe different rules apply here. Maybe it's not, maybe it doesn't need to fit in the same box, in the same category of everything else. But yeah.
I think that makes sense. I have just 2 points. The first thing is, I know like the gateway where everything is targeted via target ref, but like these label selectors, there is no fixed resource for it. So for the target refs, we cannot point to a fixed resource. It could be pod, but the name of the pod you just cannot put. So it just do not give users a intuitive way to add these label selectors in the target ref. And Kubernetes, like all these APIs in the Kubernetes has selectors as a top level resource, like the Kubernetes service has the selectors which selects pod, same as network policies and all those things. So I think users know how to use these selectors if we put it in top level, if we do not add in target ref. And the second thing is, if we put the label selector inside the target ref, the namespace wide policy, the creation or the idea of creating a namespace wide policy for users would be difficult, because generally users would want a namespace wide policies for the mesh workloads, not for the gateways. And if a gateway is somehow in the same namespace, and in the target ref they put the label selector and the gateway, both of these things, how would they apply a namespace wide policy of like with their
What-
This is
why is I don't understand what is the problem. It's just the location, right? Like, to the first point, I think, target ref is you could call it a unique way, right? I'm not sure how unique it is, but like it's the gateway API policy attachment, right? Like theoretically, the original authors of this policy could say, hey, we have no such precedence in any other Kubernetes API, and we have selectors or top level, whatever. But like currently we're landing on target ref. Target ref is right now being used in many different policies. So I think, the first at least intuition would be go for target ref. Now, regarding where to put the selectors, I don't understand how pod selectors in the upper, like not within target ref, just in the same level, how would it indicate something more simple, both for namespace or not? So like, for example, one of the things you can do for namespace is like, you do pod selectors inside a target ref, right? Like for the people that didn't have a chance to actually read the current proposed API. So it's going to be a target ref pod, and then within this special target ref, you will be able to say selector. Obviously, you would not be able to say pod name. And this selector would just represent the pod selector, which is probably going to be the same struct that's going to, like we're talking about the top level one. So I imagine you probably want to represent namespace wide policy with pod selector, and like whether like Istio it's empty selector, or whether we want to introduce an enum that says all the pods in the namespace. That's a very small semantic difference, and I think not worth spending the time here. But like empty selectors or this enum could be implemented in both in both levels. Like why is the upper one like provides an easier way for people to reason about it?
First, like empty selectors also could be confusing. This one, what I'm suggesting with this is like if there is there is no concept of like the namespace wide policies for gateways. If somebody wants to apply a policy for gateways, they have to explicitly add the gateway name in the target refs. So assume a policy is like this. If somebody doesn't add a pod label selector, the policy is just for the namespace and there is no target ref, that means the policy is for the entire namespace for all the mesh workload in the namespace. The moment they add the target refs in the policy, that means the policy is for the gateways. If they add the gateways or the gateway listeners inside the targets. So that is what my suggestion is. Like there shouldn't be any concept of namespace wide policy for gateways, because generally like users won't create a namespace wide policy for gateways. They won't be
right. But you're saying, that's debatable. But like you were saying, you disallow this pod selector to be coexisting with the target ref, right?
Yes.
So you could do the same by disallowing. I mean, I'm not saying one way is better than the other. I mean, other than echoing what Rob said, but like you could disallow the same thing with cell by saying, okay, if you have a target ref gateway, you cannot or if you have a target ref kind pod, you're not allowing anything other than it. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm not saying what's more confusing on what's less confusing. I'm just saying you could achieve the exact same thing and the exact same functionality. And then the debate is kind of boils down to what's more cohesive UX and what's more friendly for users. Obviously, and I want to let Jan put the feedback, but obviously Istio users, for example, would be much more used to your proposal, right? Where like, okay, they know they have pod selectors in the upper one and target ref for the bottom one. Whether it's good or bad, we don't know. But yeah.
Not just Istio users, Kubernetes users, right? Kubernetes users use pod selector like this.
I am not sure about this. But yeah, Jan, did you have any feedback?
I was just gonna say, when a gateway is implemented as a pod in a namespace, it is useful to be able to express policy about that workload itself. So I don't think we should just blanket discount that. If you have a policy that's namespace wide and there's a gateway in that namespace, there is a good argument that the policy should apply to that gateway.
I agree. Yeah.
And we have specifically had, in Istio, we've had users who were like, hey, when I have a namespace policy, why doesn't it apply to this gateway? So we've had a fix for that go in.
Yeah, I agree. And also you could theoretically, this gateway, whether has a special label, if someone wants to exclude it or something, they could do it with the right label selectors that does not include the labels on this gateway. At least that's what I was thinking initially, if there is a use case to include it, exclude it, sorry. But Arjan, to the initial point, I think Rob mentioned this initially. I think a lot of the people that are actually going to have very good and strong opinions about it are not really here anymore. Do you want me to also bump this to the next one as well?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, it'll be useful if you kind of, whether it's in the issue, you can write a recap or something. But then for the next meeting, we could start from something. Yeah, so I'll also edit in the next one. Cool. I just edited to the next one. I think the next Arjan, did you finish? Can we go to the next one or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks for the feedback, guys.
Yeah, I think the next one is Rose.
Yeah. Hello, guys. For this GitHub issue, it's basically it's basically the same as the last one. If anyone read that, it's reorganizing the documentation and finding a way to to smooth out that process of going from our old finding a way to smooth out how we're transitioning from our old navigation to our new navigation so that we don't break links. And the biggest part of this that matters the most for you guys to review is the documentation outline, where it's just hey, here's the new structure of the docs, where we would be putting everything. And it's just, yeah. One big difference between this and the last one is that this one we're staying in MKDocs, because I didn't realize that we could do a lot of this in MKDocs with a Python hook. MKDocs allows you to add like additional like build step features through Python, and that's what we're going to be using to fix these links.
Oh, that's great.
That's amazing. Yeah, this is cool. Okay.
I didn't do that either. That's pretty exciting
Yeah.
though.
This is so incredibly detailed. Thank you for writing this up. Yeah. So it sounds like you've already done some experimentation with hooks here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um,
How?
um,
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
so like the actual code of it is like a lot simpler. It's just like figuring out like it exists like this because it's like this weird obscure part of the documentation for MKDocs, and it's like, oh, you can do this, and I'm like, okay, well, this is something I can do. Um, this is like a really big project, so I've spoken to a few other students at my college, and we're like trying to bring them on and help me like just do all of this for this summer. I'm thinking like one, like get the first phase, which is outlined as like get the actual script written, like, and finalize like the documentation outline. I think like it's pretty good. Like it's I think just doing the basics of like organizing it into the 4 categories of like how-to guides and explanation and reference, um and what and tutorials that will just immediately improve it. And then there's the point of adding all of this content and rewriting it, which is more of a long-term project, obviously.
This is awesome. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. What can we do to help you out here? Is it like any feedback you're looking for? I mean, at first glance, this looks incredible to me.
Thanks. I wasn't really hmm. I I think for feedback, I think really just what you just said, like this plan looks good, because on some level I still don't know what I'm doing.
No, that's great.
To helping review this. Yeah, definitely really appreciate your effort here. I have some prior familiarity with like static site generator architectures like this, so I could certainly take a look and yeah, just really appreciate your effort of like also kind of rethinking this and pivoting from Next.js to seeing like what's actually possible with MKDocs. So yeah, this is really exciting. Thank you.
Well, I think I'm pretty much done on this issue. If like anyone else has any questions about like how this would work, I'm just like thankful for all the good feedback. This took me forever.
Yeah, thanks for doing this. And I also see, yeah, lots of good reviews there. So thanks everyone that's also reviewing this PR. Yeah, so if I summarize this, so is this PR ready for review, or is there anything other than reviews that we could do to help?
I think this is just an issue that
Oh.
is like a plan, right, Rose?
Yeah.
This is what you're planning to do. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
This
yeah,
is
man.
basically the high level, like epic roadmap kind of thing. And then it's something that we can like aim towards, and something that we could like split into like many more GitHub issues as like a roadmap.
Yeah, sorry, I meant this issue. One thing I want to clarify, Rose, like, are you planning to also work on this, or?
Yeah.
Okay, this sounds good to me. Yeah, I'll make a note for myself at least, because I didn't review it yet, to review. And yeah, our like question for the rest of the people, what are we hoping to like to kind of stamp it and get the get it stamped and then like kind of execute it, or like is Rose need to wait on something like this, or is it going to be when's going to be a good time to actually start doing this? Candice, you had your hand up.
I just had a suggestion that we target 1.5 rather than 1.4 for this, since we have so much writing already
Yeah.
on 1.4.
I think that this kind of change is not something that needs to be tied to any release. It can fit where it fits. I definitely agree with you, Candace. I don't want to get in the way of 1.4 release. Like if we end up finding out that this is going to completely stall our 1.4 release work, then I think we should prioritize 1.4. But I'm hoping that we can do these kind of in parallel, because for the most part, these, most changes in 1.4 are incremental changes to GEPs, which are contained in single markdown files, and then changes to API types, which would be completely detached from this, I would hope. So if we can keep that true, I would recommend trying to do both, just because this is a huge amount of work, and if we have people that are willing and able to take a shot at it now, I definitely want to encourage you to keep on with the momentum you have here, because this is great.
Yeah, and I think just as a point of clarification, like this isn't code that has to ship in a specific release. So if this lands a month before or a month after 1.4 and is a like lower priority task for people who are committing to reviewing GEPs for the 1.4 scope, I think that's fine.
Yeah, +1.
Cool.
So
Sorry.
so I'm really like thinking about this as like a more like not something that we like drag on, but also like not something that we're rushing into like 1.4, because this is just not something that's super time sensitive, I feel like. And I'm trying to like distribute this work over some period of time, so I can also like get some of my other classmates that are trying to help also, because I know you guys are like stretched thin.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm so glad you're able to
great.
loop more people in
Yeah.
here. Yeah.
That's great.
Everyone's invited. There's no, you don't have to get a ticket or a specific invitation or anything.
Yeah, 100%.
Cool. Does anyone has anything else on the agenda, or are we good to call?
I
No, I'm
will,
good.
oh,
Go ahead.
can I, sorry. I was trying to make up a list of all the remaining PRs. I'm not sure I got everything. Not even sure that I've got all of the features that we're trying to get. Are we trying to get 10 features into?
Candice, what does done mean? Like done means that it was
Done,
merged?
well, done means there's no more PRs that need to be reviewed by the for GEP API review.
Oh, well, I think some of these still have. So Flynn's ones, the default gateways and external gateways are still in review. I guess what we should say is they are ready for review, but they are not done as in merged.
I think all of them are ready for review, right?
Yeah, yes. Everything that we need to be ready for review is ready for review, which is great. Thank you, everyone. Flynn in this particular cycle deserves extra credit because he's taken on, you know, 2 incredibly complex gaps in one cycle. So good luck to him. Supported features, I think this one's pretty close to done. It's just final bits of work. Named route rules, I think this is just a formality. Back-end TLS policy, I know there's still some work ongoing for conformance tests. I think you're waiting for review at this point, right, Candace?
Well, no, I'm actually just talking about the GEPs that need to be reviewed by
Okay.
July 22nd.
So I think that
Okay.
the thing is that July 22nd, they all need to be merged, right? So
Yeah.
the reviews ideally happens before.
Yeah, but they are, yeah, like I think your point, Candace, is that they are all ready for review now. But
I
yes,
thought the last 2 default and external and configurable retries were all merged in terms of the GEPs.
I think there were two phases here. There definitely, yeah. So the first phase was basically agree on the like you know, the basics of goals, non-goals, scope, you know, essentially, and those all had PRs merged in time. And now we're on to what does the shape of the API look like? And those PRs are open and ready for review right now.
And I think, speak to retry specifically, that's something that had to get merged 2 cycles ago. This is promotion to standard, so it'll only work there
yeah.
in implementation phase.
Yeah.
And I've just been procrastinating on getting to it.
Okay, so that one is theoretically the GEP review is done for configure.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was done 2 releases ago. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Get merged. And I'm missing some from this list. That's all I wanted to. Well, we can go over it next time.
Yeah, I think Shane's issue or discussion is probably the best source of truth right now for where things are at. I think he's got links to everything.
I couldn't make sense. I couldn't find what I needed in there, so I was trying to make this list of things that still need review. Because in his list, you have to click through every single one of them and then do some searching. So, is there an easier way for us to? Can we tag these PRs that need review, or?
Yes, we should add them to the milestone at least. I would defer to Shane. Shane's supposed to be our release manager for this time, and he's been experimenting with some new machinery. I would run any ideas by him to see what's best. But at first glance, I know he's been experimenting with project boards. That would be a good use here, or milestones, or both.
I think if you just, I mean, that's useful, right? But also if you just do label kind gap, most of the gaps here would be.
There are some things that like may
Yeah.
not be in scope though, so you may get some noise of just.
Yeah.
I don't know, but yeah.
I mean, there's a way, but like to Kenny's point, there is a way to tag. I think to label with v1.4, we just need to figure out the right label. So just as an example, if I open these issue I created and I try to add a label, I cannot do it manually here, but like probably find a label of 1.4. So then we have a way to just tag them.
Yeah, all of the issues are tagged, but none of the PRs are.
Yeah.
As far as I can tell. So it's a little hard to find which ones are waiting for review.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think you collected all of them there. So, but yeah, for next time, I think we could improve. Cool. I gotta run. Thanks, everyone. I mean, feel free to stay if anyone else has any other things on their mind.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks for great feedback.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Okay, y'all.
Bye.
Have a good evening.
Thanks. Cheers.